The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
My sister, the favorite, decided to schedule her wedding for my exact date. The announcement hit the dinner table hard, like shattering glass under pressure. Our parents immediately chuckled, finding the move smart rather than hurtful. Candlelight highlighted the shine in her hair. I held my hand steady, tracing circles on the edge of my water glass. "You don't mind, do you?" she inquired, her voice sweet yet sharp. I gave a quick nod. Not at all. They took my quiet response as defeat. They were unaware of the finalized guest list already waiting in my organizer. Within 2 months, that table would go silent again, but because of a completely different situation. I was 8 years old when I first learned quietness offered protection. My sister, Madison, was standing on the front steps. Sunlight illuminated her dress while Mom adjusted her hair for a local commercial shoot. "Wider smile, sweetie," Mom encouraged, her eyes warm. I stood behind them, holding the lunchbox I made for myself, hoping someone would finally see me. Nobody did. I put great effort into school. Good grades were the only way I could carve out space for myself. When I showed Dad a perfect score on a test, he barely glanced up from his newspaper. "Try not to make your sister self-conscious," he ordered. His tone lacked emotion, yet the words were sharp. I neatly creased the paper and put it away in my desk drawer. Folding up evidence of my effort became routine. My sister was always the favorite. When she failed a course, Mom faulted the instructor. When I earned top marks, she offered no comment. When I turned 13, my birthday cake featured both our names. "We believed it would be fun to celebrate together," Mom explained. Madison extinguished every candle before I had a chance to blow out one. I learned how to applaud her success, even when it stung. Our father held a job at an insurance firm. He often came home smelling of paper and frustration. I made myself useful by cleaning dishes, handling bills, and maintaining the house's quiet routines. He approved. He would say, "You're dependable." The words never conveyed affection. During high school, I liked a boy in my geometry class. I mentioned this to my sister just once while braiding her hair. She looked in the mirror and smiled, then started dating him the next week. When I broke down, Mom told me, "Stop exaggerating. He simply likes more attractive girls." After that evening, I stopped sharing anything important to me. University was not possible for me. Dad explained, "Your sister requires the tuition money more." So I started working right after finishing school, entering invoices in a dull office cubicle. My former teacher, Mr. Harrison, assisted me with the application process. "You're smart, Claire," he insisted. "Don't let them minimize you." I thanked him, but being small felt secure. At 22, I rented a studio apartment downtown in Boston. It was extremely quiet. White walls, a clock ticking, and shelves stacked with color-coded paperwork. I valued the organization. I rose early, drank coffee, and reviewed my planner. I wrote down every detail by hand. I didn't rely on memory. It was too easily twisted. Sometimes my sister called, not to check on me, but to boast. New vehicles, new clothes, growing social media following. Our parents loved hearing her updates. "She is doing so successfully," Mom commented one time. "You ought to follow her example." I confirmed as usual. Staying quiet maintained harmony. However, within that quietness, something precise began to develop. I mastered waiting, careful observation, and noticing things others overlooked. The folded school papers of my youth evolved into the organized adult lists and receipts. Proof accumulated neatly in file cabinets. That is when I realized silence was not peace. It was planning. The call arrived late on a Tuesday evening. Rain was tapping against my window while I finished updating my wedding guest list in the planner. The screen lit up with my sister's name. I nearly ignored it. "Hey," she greeted, sounding too cheerful. "Guess what? My wedding date just got confirmed. It's the exact same day as yours." For a moment, all I heard was the clock ticking. "The same day," I repeated. "Yeah, but you're having a small gathering anyway, right? Only close family," she said, chuckling softly. "Our relatives will obviously be at mine. I mean, it makes logical sense." The line went silent long enough for her to catch her breath. "Claire, you're fine with that, aren't you?" I focused on the ink circle marking my wedding date in the planner. I pressed the pen tip onto the paper until the mark deepened slightly and bled. "Yes," I finally replied. "I'm fine with it." When the call disconnected, I remained seated in the dark for a long period. Only the rain made noise. My reflection in the window appeared calm, almost distant, but my hand felt numb. Later that evening, Mom phoned. "Your sister secured a much larger venue," she announced happily. "Everyone will attend her event. You can keep yours low-key, maybe after hers is over." Dad spoke up from the background. "Be supportive, Claire. It's her special day." "Of course," I repeated, the same 2 words. Once the line cut off, I opened my planner. 2 identical circles seemed to glow under the desk lamp, hers and mine. I added one small note next to my date, confirmed. "Do not move." They would classify it as pure coincidence. They would insist I didn't care, but I understood the truth better. They had spent years conditioning me to remain insignificant, quiet, and in the background. This time, I would stay exactly where I was, under the very spotlight they believed belonged only to her. The morning following that call, I woke before my alarm. The apartment was gray and perfectly still, the kind of quiet that feels like anticipation. Steam from my coffee misted the window, blurring the Boston skyline. I opened my planner and ran a finger over the word confirmed. The ink was dry and smooth. I arrived at the office at 8 o'clock sharp. I had worked at the company for 9 years, long enough to execute things without drawing attention. While my colleagues discussed their weekend plans, I logged into the HR portal and began writing an internal memo. Invitation to the Reed Jennings wedding, formal attendance requested. I didn't dispatch it yet. I saved it as a draft. My cursor pulsed like a heartbeat. By noon, I had contacted the event manager. "Yes," I confirmed, "we will maintain the original date." She paused. "Are you absolutely certain regarding the other family?" "I am certain," I interrupted gently, "but we will now require the grand ballroom instead." "Certainly, Ms. Garcia," she agreed. That evening, I informed Ethan, my fiancé, about the call. He was quiet for a long while, then asked, "You truly aren't changing the date?" "No," I confirmed. He nodded once, his face unreadable. "Then we execute it flawlessly. Proper guest list, proper illumination, proper sound." I gave a faint smile. Proper silence. The next week unfolded in a sequence of quick, unseen actions. Click. I finished the HR email draft on my computer. Swipe. My pen checked off confirmed RSVPs from top executives and department heads. Print. I sealed the stack of envelopes with gold wax. Check. Payments were processed for the ballroom rental, catering, and a live band. Every task was executed with precision and intent. The pace was constant and emotionless. I understood then that silence was not merely absence. It was complete control. My mother called again halfway through the week. "Your sister's reception is going to look amazing," she said. "You'll come by and help us set things up, won't you?" I glanced at the folder of invoices beside me. "I have appointments that day," I replied. "Busy?" she questioned. "But it is her wedding." "Yes," I said quietly, "it is." She didn't notice the subtle shift in my tone. She never did. In the evenings, I spread out all the materials on my dining table. The seating arrangement, the printed guest list, and the event timeline. Ethan sat across from me, reviewing the details. "Are you sure this isn't too elaborate?" he asked once. "It's not enough," I corrected him. He offered a slow, appreciative smile. "Then let's make it perfect." A week later, we visited the venue together. The grand ballroom was enormous and bright, with chandeliers casting light like shattered ice. "It's elegant," I told the manager, "but keep the decor minimal." "Yes, ma'am," he responded. I felt the thick ivory fabric of the drapes under my fingers. "No excessive ornaments. I want the guests to notice the quiet atmosphere." The staff looked confused. Ethan understood. Each night I recorded small, critical details. The precise final guest count, the seating for Mr. Jennings, Ethan's father, and the CEO, and scheduling changes. I reserved special parking for senior executives and booked the live musicians from the company's annual charity gala roster. Every important name I added to my list meant one less prominent guest for my sister. She and her fiancé, Andrew, had selected the same facility complex, 2 separate halls on the same floor. She believed this overlap would humiliate me. When the final confirmation email arrived from HR, stating attendance was mandatory for all upper management. I read it twice, then filed it away. One evening, I found an old box in my closet. Inside, hidden among old notebooks, was the folded test from my childhood. The red 100 still stood out against the creases. I carefully smoothed it flat on the table. Beside it, I placed the current wedding schedule, neat rows of names, sealed approvals, and payment receipts. They shared the same shape and order, but held completely different meanings now. Ethan walked in and paused. "What's all this? A reminder?" "Yes," I said. He looked at the paper, then at me. "You seem completely calm." "I learned from the best," I replied. "Your family." "No," I corrected. "They're failures." The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I pressed my dress, double-checked the planner one last time, and set it on the window ledge where it would catch the morning light. The city outside, Boston, was hushed, the traffic quieted. I watched the sun rise, the glass turning gold from its reflection. At 7 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Mom again. "Your sister is so anxious," she said. "She keeps asking if you're feeling jealous." "I am not," I stated. "Tell her not to worry. I won't cause any problems for her." "You are such a kind girl," Mom sighed, relief evident in her voice. I ended the call before I whispered to myself, "Not anymore." In the stillness that followed, I could almost hear the next day waiting. 2 weddings, the same date, the same location. They assumed it would crush me. They hadn't realized they had just booked seats for their own silent reckoning. That morning, the air felt dense and metallic, the kind of quiet before a storm. I was calm but focused. I arrived early, the hem of my dress brushing the marble floor of the hotel lobby. Staff members rushed by with flower arrangements and trays of champagne. 2 signs stood at the main entrance: Ballroom A, Jennings Reed; Ballroom B, Madison and Andrew. Same date, same building, 2 distinct realities. Our ceremony started at noon. Guests entered, keeping their voices low, the room gently buzzing with polite conversation. I noticed Mr. Jennings seated near the front, along with his colleagues, Ethan's friends, and my own coworkers. The crystal chandeliers illuminated the room as the string quartet began playing. The music resonated through the floor like a heartbeat. Upstairs, a florist whispered to a passing server, "Didn't almost half the guests cancel on the other wedding?" The server nodded. Something about a mandatory corporate event. By the time we exchanged our vows, the other hall was nearly empty. When I turned to Ethan and said, "I do," the applause was soft but meaningful. It felt earned. Through the tall windows, I caught sight of my sister in the courtyard below. Her gown was striking, but her face looked stressed. Andrew was packing beside her, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. 30 minutes later, as our reception was beginning, they appeared. I spotted them before anyone else did. Mom, Dad, my sister, and Andrew, all dressed for the wrong celebration. Their expressions changed sharply when they saw the crowd. The executives, the press photographers, the Jennings family, all gathered like a powerful constellation. My sister blinked, struggling to understand. "What? Why are all my guests here?" she whispered. Andrew's voice cracked. "These are my company's major clients. Why are they here?" Mr. Jennings stood up, his presence silent yet absolute. "It is odd, isn't it?" he said. "2 weddings on the same date, but only one of them is my son's." The microphone picked up his voice, projecting it across the entire ballroom. A deep, clean silence instantly spread. Mom's smile disappeared. Dad tried to regain control. "We were completely unaware." Mr. Jennings turned towards them, his tone mild. "You didn't need to be. Some people only grasp the concept of order once they are excluded from it." My sister grabbed Andrew's arm. "Say something." He stepped away instead, his collar appearing too tight. You told me selecting this date would embarrass her. My sister's voice trembled. You agreed to it. Their argument spilled into the quiet like an outburst of static. Guests exchanged glances. Cameras flashed. I didn't move. I stood by the table, glass in hand, maintaining the same composure I had held during the dinner where this all began. The chandelier's reflection flickered on the wine's surface. My planner sat on the table next to the guest book, neatly closed. Mr. Jennings spoke again, softer this time. Let's reserve this day for the people who earned their place here. At his signal, staff gently escorted the intruders out, politely, just as noise is removed from a room intended for music. As the doors closed behind them, the quartet began a slow, measured piece. The tension dissolved into applause. I raised my glass slightly, not a triumphant gesture, just enough to see my own reflection briefly waver in the wine. Ethan touched my hand. They are gone, he said softly. I know. Across the hall, I faintly heard another door slam. Ballroom B, most likely someone shouting, and then nothing. The sound faded into the music and the quiet murmur of conversation. They came to watch me fail, I said under my breath. Instead, they saw what silence can build. Ethan offered a small, steady smile. And destroy. We clinked glasses once, not celebrating victory, but the restoration of balance. The rest of the evening proceeded smoothly. No dramatic speeches, no chaos, just the steady sound of silverware against china and laughter that belonged in the correct room this time. When it concluded, I took a final look at the chandelier light, the guests, and the polished floor where my reflection was clear and solid. The silence they left behind was perfect. The morning after the wedding, Boston was freshly cleaned. The skyline glowed pale gold through the window, and the streets were quiet and damp. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, stirring sugar into my coffee. The cup tapped softly against the counter, steady and slow. Ethan was still asleep. The sound of his breathing mixed with the refrigerator's hum. On the dining table lay my planner, now closed, its pages slightly curved from heavy use. Beside it, our marriage certificate rested flat under the morning light. The seal caught the light, the same shade as the ink I used to circle that date months earlier. For many years, I had deliberately minimized and hidden proof of myself. Grades, receipts, unspoken intentions. Yesterday, I finally revealed everything. There was no argument, no shouting. Just a calm line drawn straight through everything that used to cause pain. I thought about my sister. Perhaps she, too, woke up to silence. An empty voicemail, an unanswered call, the sound of her own reflection cracking. Maybe my parents were sitting at home, still trying to process the moment the room stopped applauding for them. I felt no satisfaction imagining it, only distance. The kettle whistled quietly. I turned it off before it could get loud. Ethan walked in, hair messy, eyes half closed. "Morning," he mumbled. "Morning," I replied. He leaned against the counter. "Are you all right?" I nodded. "Yes, finally." We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't need to. It had already served its purpose, ending something old and beginning something quiet. When he left for work, the apartment settled back into its calm rhythm. I slightly opened the window. The air smelled of rain and bakery bread from the shop below. Somewhere far off, a train moved through the city, its horn low and receding. I sat at the table, opened my planner one last time, and drew a clean line under the final entry. Jennings' wedding completed. Then I closed it and placed it beside the certificate. The light shifted across both documents, merging them into a single, soft reflection. Silence this time did not mean absence. It meant ownership. In families like mine, power doesn't scream, it pulls back. When it does, the room finally hears what true silence sounds like. It isn't empty. It is earned. It is the sound of boundaries settling into place, of peace finding its own volume after years of being talked over.